היום אנו ניצבים מולכם שוב, ויכולים לומר
We were all watching on the internet the press conference that Ayman was giving, and it took him so long. I mean, there was such a long preamble.
יעדינו, כפי שהוגדרו ביציאה למבצע, הושגו במלואם, ואף מעבר לכך.
And then he actually announced it, but everyone knew at that point that that's where it was heading, and there was no applause, cries of relief. I don't exactly know why. I don't know whether it was that we didn't really believe it, or it seemed really inappropriate after all that had happened and all the lives lost for us to be relieved and to go, thank God it's over.
Now let's go to Gaza City, live there. Ayman, Mohyeldin, been there throughout the conflict. Very unusual, Ayman, to see you without one of those protective hats on, but I suppose it's one of the first real chances you've had to get out and assess the damage.
Absolutely, David. In fact, we're standing about 2 kilometers away from the border between Israel and Gaza on the northeastern part of Gaza, in a city or town, Izzat Abed Rabbo. In fact, it's a scene that's repeating itself all over across the Gaza Strip. You can see hundreds of people have been making their way throughout the course of the morning as they try to come in and make their way through the rubble of what is left over. It is a very emotional scene as people really grab whatever they can. In fact, you can see people grabbing wood that they'll probably be using for fire later on in the evening. In fact, people also grabbing the olive trees. So much of the farmland around this particular area has been completely destroyed, and people are trying to get whatever they can.
That very first day of the ceasefire, we went to one of the most hard-hit areas, the Zaytun neighborhood.
It was the earliest morning I got up throughout the whole war, which really surprised everyone because everyone thought now things are going to calm down. But for me, I thought finally I'm going to be able to get to those areas that I've been talking about for the past 3 weeks. There were houses that were demolished from the airstrikes, but then there were houses that I went into that were just trashed. It's as if there was somebody, a madman in there with an axe, just, waving it around. It was just destruction everywhere. And the writings on the wall that we saw, the windows that were scratched at the bottom because that's where the guns were put on as like a striking an advantage point for the soldiers.
For hours that morning, people were still sifting through the rubble, trying to find whatever remains they can of people, of their loved ones. And one of the most powerful images I saw was some of the rescue workers there, finding a body, and really the only way to identify it was the wedding ring on the hand of the person of the body that they recovered. And I remember they passing that on to the paramedics who, registered it and put it in a bag and carried it away. Wholesale civilian suffering and destruction everywhere we went.
Gaza has been shattered by Israel's 3-week-long war on the Gaza Strip. But the people here, amid the chaos and confusion, have been showing signs of resilience as they begin to repair their homes, their bombed-out businesses, their schools, and their lives. But Gaza is still a territory under siege, bereaved and bereft of international support. The West blames Hamas, all while the suffering of the people continues.
The most difficult thing was seeing where the people begin to pick up the pieces to their lives. Where does a father who lost all of his children and his wife go? Where does a farmer who has no more land, to farm, earn a living, and to see the faces of these people and to hear their stories and to hear them ask us for help, was very, heart-wrenching, because as much as we wanted to convey their story, we also knew that there was nothing we could immediately do to help these people. And throughout the course of the war, we had been hearing particularly about this family, the Samuni family, whose particular story had become the story that people associated this war with. The suffering of, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, all captured in one single family.
The accounts of what happened to the extended Samuni family in Zaytun are slowly emerging. Nawar and her family told us about being huddled in a single house with dead and injured family and neighbors. Paramedics were prevented by the Israeli army from entering the area for days.
I walked into the home of one of the Samunis, and all the people I'd spoken to, the kids, the adults, all of their stories came back to me.
Her husband Majid showed us the room his wife gave birth in, the floor their baby daughter spent her first few minutes on. The smell of dirt and blood here was overwhelming.
And I stood there in that room, and I thought, how am I supposed to explain this? How do I explain to everyone out there what it's like for a child to spend 4 days inside this house with dead people around them, watching Israeli tanks shelling their relatives and their family members in other houses? So many things that you can now prove that aren't just stories, the witnesses and hearsay, that are actually physically there.
Knowing that Gazans cannot leave Gaza is something that weighs very heavily on my conscience.
My first feeling coming out of Gaza was definitely one of guilt.
I think sometimes we take for granted what it means to be able to move freely from country to country, city to city, place to place. And for people who have been living here for years without being able to leave, I would never speak to them with the tone or the attitude of, I can't wait till I leave and get out of here.
ليش دمنا رخيص احنا يا الفلسطينيه؟ ليش دمنا رخيص لهالدرجه هذه؟ ليش بيبيعوا فينا بتجروا فينا هيك؟ اشمعنا مصر عايشه بسلام؟ اشمعنا الاردن عايشه بسلام؟ ليش احنا هيك محرومين من كل حاجه؟ ليش احنا محرومين؟ والولاد ايش ذنبهم الاطفال هذه؟ ايش ذنبها البنت هذا ردها حليب بميه وسخه؟ ايش ذنبهم هيك؟ والله الباقي ما بترضى تشربها. ايش ذنبنا؟ ايش ذنبنا نتشرد بواعي زي النسمه البرد هيك تقتلنا؟ ايش ذنبنا؟ مش حرام؟ اخرتهم هيدا يجيبوا لنا بطانيتين وفرشه وعلبه حليب مش عايزينها، عايزين نرجع لبيوتنا نشتغل وناكل ونشرب ونعيش احنا زي ما بقيت الامه عايشه. وين الامه العربيه اللي علمونا اياها في المدارس نكتبها؟ وينها لما قالوا لنا من الدجله والفرات للنيل؟ وينها؟ وين امتنا العربيه؟ وينها؟ مش حرام عليهم؟
As a journalist, maybe the most exhilarating thing is to feel that you are the only one covering this story. That everything you do is going to be exclusive. Everywhere you choose to point the camera will be somewhere that people outside, certainly in the English-speaking world, will not have seen. But as a person, an individual, it's an incredible responsibility to feel that if you were tired that day, you were too scared to go out, or you could have gone a little bit further and got another story, someone else would have been able to get their story out to the world.
There's definitely a frustration in knowing that what you observed and what you've tried to document here isn't going to reach everyone in the world, and isn't necessarily going to reach everyone in the world who can make a difference when it comes to this place.
Nobody was there. It was just us. The tragedy was all ours to describe, and at some points I thought there is no way I'm going to be able to do this story justice. There's no way I can describe what I'm seeing. The horror that I'm seeing and the horror on the faces of these people is not something I can put into words in 2.5 minutes, in 20 minutes.